We're the Vinyl Verdict. I'm Jacob.
I'm Michael.
Today we're reviewing the Badfinger self-titled, untitled, not really sure, first album on Warner Brothers. Found out years later it was supposed to be called For Love or Money, but title was left off. It has an interesting relationship with the last Apple album, Ass, which we recently reviewed. And it was really, they started the recording sessions right after the end. The last mixing of Ass took place in May of 1973. And then they started recording this Untitled album from June to November of 1973, and it was released in February of 74. Even though it feels very different, they probably were writing a lot of these songs around the same time and recording them just a couple months later, and the album was even released at the same time or slightly earlier in certain parts of the world. Billboard performance on this one was not great either. It only hit number 161 on the Billboard 200, so their lowest charting album, including the reunion albums. It does have some classic songs on it, and it's again produced by Chris Thomas, so there was some great material to work with here. I have very little association with this album. I think this is the one for me that fell through the cracks of the Warner Brothers era. The next one, Wish You Were Here, is definitely more significant, and the next direction or the next step of where I thought the band was heading. This one always felt like a little bit of hesitation in between that pivot to Warner Brothers.
They did come out retrospectively really close together. You had time though to listen to what we thought was the new album, and then shortly thereafter a whole bunch of new other songs, and that was this album. You could pick out some really fine songs out of it. Of course, being a fan, nothing really missed with me, but it was just, it almost was like their individual styles put together, and you could by that time tell.
Yeah, they always compare it to, well, I know once or twice I've heard it mentioned as like the Badfinger White Album, which other than not being titled, I don't see much of a similarity. There's a lot of songs where there's not as much harmony or cross-writing, but that was already happening on Ass.
Just maybe in the general way, it was already happening on Ass, and I guess we're talking about that the group played together, but it was easy to tell who wrote what. And so in that sense, maybe it's like the White Album.
Okay, so album kicks off with I Miss You. We reviewed the single already. Yeah, I find the production here to be, this is the roughest part of the song. It never really builds, and you're kicking off a Badfinger album without the band Badfinger. This is just Pete Ham kind of imitating, very similar voice to when he did his home demo, and really similar voice to the Ivies in general.
Well, I agree, extremely Ivy-ish. Pete was the melody man, so there's a melody here, and there's pretty harmony here.
The second song is Shine On, another Pete sung song, but this is co-written with Tom Evans, and really the first time that they've co-written a song together since Without You, so I'm sure there was a lot of hype behind seeing that on there.
Yeah, it was interesting to see them write together. They hadn't written together for a while, and in seeing that, it did look like, and in listening to the song, it had the snap and the pop again, although maybe a little countryish in some way, but it had a little more pop of the Badfinger world than certainly the I Miss You.
Yeah, it's kind of a production 180 after I Miss You to get into something that's so produced, and there's so much space between everything, and the panning and the guitar, and the different picking and the differences in each verse. It really is kind of evolving, and then it wraps up nicely with the final ending there of just pulling away some of that instrumentation. And the solo, again, is credited to Joey, even though in the video of it, it's got Pete playing it, but in the notes of everything on the album, it is the example of kind of everyone in the band seeming to be pretty involved. Then we get into Love Is Easy. So this is the Joey song and the single in much of the world outside of the U.S. And I don't know, listening to it, again, I don't know why the fandom doesn't like this. It really does feel like they're pushing into a new direction. Like this and Mad at Spam have that mid-70s funk feel. I could see them having been very successful going in that direction. But it is a unique, different sound. It feels more progressive than the power pop stuff.
It knocked me over when I heard it. Despite the way it's been panned through the years, and the single was panned, and it was supposedly unfinished vocally and stuff, that never really registered with me either. I like the song. I love the song.
And then fourth song is Song for a Lost Friend. So Pete comes back. This is probably my favorite song on the album, and it was not the case when I first heard it, but it's grown on me a lot. And I think it's just such a strange, unique melody where it lifts and falls, and especially in the verses. And I really like the climax, what could you do, and the break and kind of the way the drums and the guitar and the way that fills that in. His guitar playing, usually like in Day After Day and stuff, he uses guitar to fill in the breaks in the lyrics. And here the guitar is actually, it's almost vocal masking, because maybe it's not counter melody. He's really playing a similar melody, just harmonizing it lower in those verses. And so it feels like he's exploring a new way of using that playing. And just a great solo. Pete's playing his own solo in the song, and in general, this is a theme on the album. It seems like, for the most part, outside of Shine On, they did play their own solos in each of their songs.
Great melody, great guitar work, a real, Badfinger taking you to school a little bit to show you the guitar work, the harmony, as you said. And the use of the guitar, the middle fill is just stunning, going through the octaves, and just a little example of their talent. And the melody of the song is pure Pete Ham, and definitely the same guy who wrote No Matter What. And it does grow on you through the years, at least on me, as a Pete melodic number that's on the album to what really was a real masterpiece. And in another day, another way, you wonder if that was flirting with possibly a more commercial status, but that wasn't the case.
I found it to be really refreshing, and I like the production on it a lot too. Except, I guess the ending, it seems like it's spiking in a lot of areas. I like the harmonies and having the guitars and do the double guitar thing, but definitely the production, even on the mix that I was listening to, the 2018 version that was supposed to be remixed, it's totally overloading, and you can hear like certain guitar parts that are just in the red. Maybe that's what they wanted. I think it's the most underrated Pete Ham song of the like 1970-74 core era, because it's not, even, so he didn't really play any of it. We'll get into the live stuff, but like none of the stuff on this album, only the Joey songs were really ever played live. They did Island and Love Is Easy and Give It Up, obviously, and then Andy Norris, even during the Man Tour, allegedly, although I'd never heard a recording of it. But they never played any Pete or Tommy song from this album live. The fans still say, Lonely You or Shine On would have been the hits. And I think as it goes into the next song, Tommy's track number 5, Why Don't We Talk, and it has obviously this extended intro of background noise and everything, that ending crescendo becomes even more epic as that finish kind of, it goes into silence for like 45 seconds or something. It really leaves you with the echo of that final note. Yeah, that adds a lot of weight, I think, to the previous song as well, and that was probably strategic in the sequencing.
The jokes of saying why not eat pork or something or whatever. We had a good time with it. The interesting thing about the Tommy songs with Badfinger, there's a line almost from Believe Me, from No Dice Days, where there's the double guitar spot or the Pete Joey dual lead, and this song has it as well, and that always lifts the Tommy song up.
I think it does create a little bit of a theme for the album, because again, Song for a Lost Friend also was very strategic in having these double guitar climbing and descending parts. The BPM, like the pacing of it's also so stunted, because even the way Tom's singing it, it feels like he's trying to speed it up, but they set it to be this really kind of lethargic pacing of like stomping along. And I hear at the end there's a guitar that's produced very differently. I think again it's through a Leslie speaker, or it's simulating that kind of flanger through a Leslie speaker. We close the first side of the album with Island by Joey Molland, and this is like Constitution Part 2. Really heavy rock song. Again, really rhythmically interesting. A little drum pocket here that everyone's getting into. The bass pedal, it's a very different beat in the chorus and the verse, but they're both really produced on drums. Like you hear the bass pedal driving certain, it's not just quarter notes, it's doing very interesting stuff. And the snare is produced so deep. Like I've never heard, the snare sounds like a tom in this song. It's very weird on the drums.
Great rocker, unbelievable, he was turning these out left and right.
Really heavy song. They lean into that even more with the ending solo that has that slide guitar, but not like you've ever heard Badfinger play it. Very messy slide guitar, and then it has that unexpected suitcase ending.
Okay, so now we come to side 2 of Badfinger's Warner Brothers debut album. The first song that hits you is something radically different from anything that you've ever heard as a Badfinger fan, which is Mad at Spam. It just takes off, and the bass is superb, and Pete Ham lays down some of his blues cred, I guess. Master of many different genres of music, and that's how I took it at the time. Here for you blues fans, here's what we would play here's what I could play if it was in a blues band, and he just killed it. And a tight little show from Badfinger and from Pete Ham.
Well, I think the production here is great. This is a huge improvement. Not much reverb or echo or anything on it. Very close. The guitars and everything too, very, very distinct and easy to pick up. No, he's not even double tracked. No harmony. Debatably, this is actually, I think, one of the clearest vocals you get from Pete Ham in his career. And that's what's so refreshing to hear about it too, because it's a pretty high melody. So you get to hear him kind of straining and hitting some rougher kind of emotional notes on it, especially on the live BBC version. So I misspoke a little bit because mostly they only ever played Joey songs live from this album. They did do Mad at Span with the BBC. I don't know why they didn't play it live at any shows. And the bass playing is phenomenal. Tom's like funky bass playing here really connects everything. And then the brass, I think it's the only time on the album we get brass. You got the flutes on I Miss You, but clearly they turned up the production chops for these Pete Ham songs. So kind of interesting. We're now on side 2. There's no real big Pete Ham epics like we were saying on, you know, The Name of the Game, War for the Dark, or kind of these more esoteric. The songs are pretty straightforward what he's saying, and debatably even like parodying or satirizing certain genres, which and I think the Tom Evans ones are maybe a little more self-indulgent and extending a little bit further into these other sections. It's nice though. I like getting a straight 3-minute Pete Ham rock song. I have no issue with that. I enjoy that actually. We go into Where Do We Go From Here? So the second Tom Evans song. I get these confused because again, both questions in the titles and back to the Wall of Sound production and everything like that. The guitar part, again, it's counter melody during the chorus. They're not using guitar fills like they did in previous albums. It's always underneath the vocals in the chorus. Of course, there's the steel drum solo. Interesting choice. Not sure when that came into it. And then you hear some wah-wah guitar in the background as well, which is a bit strange. It's the only time on the album I think you hear wah-wah, and it's just like some chords underneath that steel drum. They did a piano solo on the outtake of this, so I don't know the story of when they decided to use the steel drums. Highlights for me in this song are the ending, the Where Do We Go backing vocals, where you really hear Pete Ham's voice and kind of the band coming out like that. And then of course, the Tom parody voice that you can probably do so well in the song of. Yeah, the lyrics. It's really extreme enunciation.
Fantastic. You get a real strong Tommy vocal in this song. Someone give you their heart, and it was just perfect for him, just to throw it all away. You know, he just was right in his right where he lives, and yet through the years it didn't leave a deep imprint among the Badfinger albums. I mean, at the time, and still to this day, I mean, that's a melodic song.
We got to say it though, the Tom Evans songwriting did take a dip during this album, and you know, and definitely in quantity.
I think that's probably the case for whatever combination of personal reasons.
Then we hear from Mike. The next song is My Heart Goes Out. So here, the vocals are, again, produced really cleanly. So it's like back and forth, track to track, and how they're producing it, and strobing guitars almost the way they're being played. Especially at the end, there's like a volume pedal guitar that really is strobing in rhythm. And that, I mean, for, you know, it makes the song much more interesting, I guess, for having kind of, or more expressive, for having kind of basic chords to play them in that way. It's good to hear Mike singing on here, and I think it changes or fulfills kind of the feel of the album more than Cowboy did on Ass. This one does feel like it's in the right tone between Lonely You and Where Do We Go From Here. It actually kind of makes sense as a transition piece.
It's an emotional song. It kind of grabs you in the heart a little bit, and he almost sounds emotional singing it.
His songwriting also is, and his ability to sing the songs himself, you know, improving and growing, and I think by Wish You Were Here, it's really at a peak as well. All right, so then we go into Lonely You, the Pete Ham song that, you know, I think is very commonly considered, more than Shine On, to be the preeminent hit material of the album and the one that's usually included on the compilations. It's nice to hear immediately in the song too. You get a clean acoustic song in one channel, which, yeah, there's a couple songs that have it, but it's nice to just hear them doing more acoustic work.
I think a lot of work went into this song, from what, you know, on the guitars and on the singing of it. It's a beautiful, wonderful song. I don't know if it has quite the punch-through strength of A Day After Day or something like that exploded like that.
The records say this is Pete doing all the solo work. So he's playing versus, you know, on Baby Blue or whatever, most of these other hits, Joey, no matter what, Joey was playing these guitar parts. You know, even on what was probably thought of as a potential hit, it seems like Pete's doing most of the playing and writing on the song. There's not a lot of contributions from the band, even on the recording of it. I think my favorite part of the song is actually the middle eight. And it's so short. It's one time right before the chorus, and it's more like a middle four because half of it is kind of the pause leading up to the solo. So the lyrical content in the middle eight is like 4 bars, but there's such a strong melody and harmony and everything there. And yeah, I wish that was longer. And I really like the ending. Again, I think it's written like a hit because it builds. You add all these backing harmonies and additional guitars, and then they cut all of it at the end, and it just, you know, Pete repeating the Lonely You lyrics. and then even stopping and just going into the music and really setting up this meditative refrain almost, and then fading out. And so the next song is Give It Up. And Joey actually comes out with the first epic for the album. I would say this is the epic song of it, and the production here really intentional. And I think it's very cool the way they decided to make it so dynamic, that really echoey vocals, crescendo each chorus, and so there's just the dynamic range. I don't even know on a record player how this thing would not break the needle. It's a cool song. I like the second chorus. He also extends it a little bit, so the verse does an extra little couplet or something, so it's even more suspense because you're kind of bracing when that chorus is going to hit. You're ready to turn it down or hold your ears, and so I think he plays with you a little bit on that in the second chorus. Yeah, the ending solo, very cool Joey version of kind of an extended solo. I wish it was longer. I know live they did it for quite a bit longer, but playing with a little bit of melody, but then going into these grungier notes at the end of it each time. So it's a very different side of Badfinger. Obviously an interesting message, not as optimistic as some of the other hit ones, and even for him.
Well said. It's as a matter of fact, the more you make that point, I'm thinking that maybe if you had to pick an epic song on this, Joey wins. It's the way it breaks between the more acoustic-y soft verses back into the just the roiling like the sea in a storm, just with the guitars just taking over and just taking you up and down, and it's quite a ride. And just the idea of alternating that style of the verses and that chorus to make it a magnificent song, to me, it was always probably one of the bigger Joey songs from those years.
And then we get into the final track 12, the encore to close out the album, and an encore that was played at, I think it was their second encore at some shows, especially in the reunion years. It's Andy Norris. And this is also the first time Joey Mullins closed an album. Usually it was Pete or Tom. So it feels so fast after some of these songs were 80 BPM, I think, really slogging along, and this just feels pretty eccentric by comparison. And then you got the hand claps in the chorus, and the way the drums and everything go away from the cymbals, and it almost makes the chorus, I was thinking, the chorus feels like a pre-chorus. There really isn't a chorus anywhere. The chorus is just kind of building up into this thing, and then it just goes right back into the verse after a pause.
And it is comprised of very notable different sections. That the structure of the song is really very different. And Joey's talking about suitcase again. Packing up my suitcase, it's just such a real energy song that didn't hurt this album to have it on the end of it. The guitar work is extraordinary. The rhythm and the hand clapping is reminiscent of the great style that I always loved with the way they just produced rock.
And then one of my favorite Badfinger moments is on this album. I think it's that second guitar solo when it goes, the first time you hear it's just the verse. The second solo, it continues into the chorus, right? When they go into that hand clap beat. And according to the library, it says that Joey plays the first solo. In the second solo, the first part of it is played by Pete, and then the second part, I think as it goes into the chorus, is then Joey taking over, doing that kind of sliding higher and higher and following a melody there. It's a nice way that you think it's going to go back into the chorus, and you get even more of this pretty guitar solo. There's a demo came out as part of the 2018 version where you hear Joey talking over that, and he's talking about doing a sax solo here, which I thought is kind of interesting because obviously the sax solo was on Mad at Spam. Kind of weird to imagine a sax solo here because it's such a rock song, but yeah, I guess they didn't know what to do with that. I think they found the perfect thing with the sliding guitar. And then of course the ending fade out, which is not a guitar solo, but kind of them screaming, yelling, fright, I think. A great way to close out an album, probably a strong finish for an album that had a lot of weak connecting points in it. I think that actually, that climax at the end
yelling something else, but was it fright?
I think it's supposed to be fright. I think he got away with it because of that.
Yeah.
So that's the Badfinger self-titled album, released again in early February 1974. We're already getting into a lot of issues about the marketing and labels and all of this business stuff that we're not going to touch on today. But even the band didn't seem to be promoting this album as much. You talk about Timeless and Blind Owl and stuff they were playing for almost a year before Ass came out. They never played a song off this thing until it was released in '74. And even then they were playing pretty exclusively the Joey stuff. There was no single that they were promoting or even songs from the rest of the band.
That's right.
So I do kind of wonder if the band, maybe the rest of the band, didn't think these songs were up to the standard standard of some of the other hits, or that, you know, they didn't even clearly identify one to promote. Its placement between Ass, which is such a strong finish to the Apple years, and Wish You Were Here, which to me is again that magnum opus that, you know, is kind of their final point. This one has a little bit of an awkward point where there's some good songs in here, but as an album, it doesn't break any new ground for me.
After all these years, the songs individually can be really enjoyable to listen to, and probably the album doesn't speak as an album as loudly as almost any other Badfinger album would.
All right, well, that's the first Warner Brothers album by Badfinger, and those are our thoughts in 2024, so we'll keep going through them and let us know what you think.